For success in our future.
Thank you for the applause. Excellent. This isn't the smallest audience that I've ever presented to, but it's getting close. Set a new low bar. As I was introduced, yes, phones to stun, please. Thank you. My name is Roger Lawrence. On the interwebs, you will find me as Rog42. Anybody know why 42? And no, it's not my age. It's the meaning to life, the universe, and everything. And what is the question? We don't know. It's in a parallel universe, and you can't know it in both universes at the same time. That's correct. So on the interwebs, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest, what are the other ones about me? Pretty much do a Google on Rog42 and you'll come up with me. I used to let people Google my name, but there's a counsellor in the UK called Roger Lawrence as well, and we kind of got confused. I work for Hewlett-Packard. I'm a Chief Technologist, Chief Technology Officer. I look after our enterprise cloud services business. So what that means is I come and give talks like this to august bodies like yourselves. I also give talks to CIOs and CTOs, do a bit of industry thought leadership. I speak to CIOs around their IT strategy, specifically around their IT delivery strategy, and where cloud computing can and will fit in. I also lead technical community back at HP, and I'm responsible for innovation as well. So whatever that means, I've got to innovate. I have a fairly checkered history. I used to program on mainframes back in the 80s, and I've done pretty much everything there is to do in IT, from programming to solution architecture to project management, to be a CTO, to manage evangelists. I used to manage evangelists at Microsoft. I used to manage the evangelism team for a couple of years, manage consultants. So a lot of breadth, depth in a couple of different areas that have quickly become outdated, and that's me. All right, one of my favorite authors. Anybody recognize this person? You're probably all too young, but you are in the right field. So I've got some nods over there. Yeah, you know who Arthur C. Clarke was? What did he write? And Space Odyssey 2001. Actually, he wasn't just a sci-fi writer. He was a famous scientist as well. He actually came up with a couple of things. And this is one of my favorite quotes. And if you think about it, think of the native Indians in America when they first came across the Europeans, and Europeans had guns and plows and all of this technology that must have seemed like magic. Think about FaceTiming somebody today in Shanghai from your mobile phone, essentially for free. Think about the silicon that needed to be invented. Think about the audio-video codecs. Think about all of the different networking protocols that have to negotiate each other. Think about cellular technology. And yet my 15-year-old picks up her phone, she FaceTimes me when I'm in Shanghai, and it just works. And that's magic, right? Okay, so challenge for today, and yes, there is going to be $10 in it. So hypothetically, I'm going to ask you to buy me a cup of coffee every day for the next 20 working days. There's the $10, by the way, just to show you that it's real. Every day for the next 20 working days, and you've got two options. Option number one is, I give you $10 a day for the coffee. You make a pretty sweet margin, about $7. $10 a day, 20 days. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that you get $200 in the deal, revenue. Option number two is, I give you 1 cent on day 1, 2 on day 2, 4 on day 3, 8 on day 4. You get it, right? 1 times 2 to the power of n up to 20. Okay, so the first question is not for the $10, but the first question is, which option do you take, 1 or 2? You take option B. Anybody else? Any other takers? You're all nodding your heads. You've all done enough computer science to figure out that option B is going to give you better return. Okay, good. Here's the question for the $10. And it's $10 now. And as I go through the presentation, it halves. So it's 1 times 2 to the minus n. right? $10 to the first person who can tell me at which day option B earns you more revenue than option A. Which day? You're not allowed to use any computing devices. Binary maths in your head. Come on.
Just a copy.
No, it's the revenue. I'm not worried about the margin, just the revenue, right? So, at what day does n times 10 equal 1 times 2 to the n? Right? Okay. So when I was thinking about this talk, I was thinking about why am I so passionate about digital literacy being imperative for our skills today? Why do I care about ICT skills specifically, but people being literate with technology? And I thought I'd look backwards. And if we look at ancient civilizations, ancient history, the Romans, Phoenicians, Egyptians, Babylonians, Chinese empires, they all had reading and writing, right? But when you get to the Middle Ages, you kind of see that the power of information was held by who?
Day 6.
It's not day 6. And you don't get a second chance. Okay, so the power of information was held by who? The church and the nobility, because there was no separation of church and state, right? So the people who got taught to read and write were the aristocracy and they were the clergy, right? And why did they do that? Well, because we didn't have the technology, we could go through about 3 pages a day is what a person could produce, maximum, right? Okay. So we shoot forward to 1450. What was invented in 1450? The Gutenberg press. Why was it invented?
Copying out books by hand was too slow.
Copying out books by hand was 3 pages a day, right? But why else? Actually, it wasn't just books. So here's a really interesting thought, interesting point. The Gutenberg press allowed clergymen to print promissory notes that they could sell for people to spend less time in purgatory. And they could provide more Bibles, right? Big problem with the printing press technology, though. What's the big problem that you have? No. Who could read? The nobility and the clergy. And if you're printing 3,000 pages per day, per press, and by the way, within 10 years, there were 171 of these presses around Europe, and by 20 years later, there were over 500 of them, all printing around 3,000 pages a day. In fact, by the end of the 15th century, by 1500, 20 million books had been produced. But what's your problem? Nobody can read. No point in providing all of this great material if nobody can read. So what do you have to do? You have to teach people to read. And who taught people to read? The church. Right, pretty much it, right? The church started making schools and universities, etc. Okay, so we come to the Victorian Empire, 1820 to 1901. We now have a different challenge, and the challenge is this. We have a computer, we have a network, right? A business network, a computer network, if you will. And the network stretches from New Zealand to Canada. And in fact, at some stage, owned the whole of the US and Alaska as well. And what sort of technology do we have for communications? Ships. How long does it take to get a letter anywhere? 6 weeks if you're lucky, right? If you're tweeting, by the way, it's at Roger42. Okay, so the challenge is this. How do I run a network where I don't have broadcast communications, I can't centralize my knowledge, everything is negotiated through a contract. And I need to be able to take somebody from here and put him here, and they need to be functional within days. Midway through that point, at around 1850, 1850 we had the Crimean War. Shortly after that, 1860s, 1870s, we had the Industrial Revolution started, steam engines, trains, all of that good stuff, beginning of the 19th century. And so what do? We suddenly had parents who used to have a business at home, teach their kids at home, and now they were on the other side of the world, right? They stole bread, they got sent to Australia. They were a soldier, they got sent to America, I don't know. But actually had lots and lots of them going to factories, not staying at home anymore. So what we did was Victoria came up with this great scheme, and we taught people to read, write, and arithmetic. Okay, read, write, and do maths. Why? Because you can take somebody, you can treat them as a standard unit of productivity. You can stick them in New Zealand, you can stick them in Canada, you can stick them in India, and they can all do exactly the same job. And they're taught exactly the same way. And do you know what? That form of schooling, my wife is a public school teacher, hasn't changed in 200 years. When we teach kids, when we teach 6-year-olds to do something, what do we teach them to do? We teach them to read, to write, and to add. If they can draw pictures, they're artistic. If they can't, that's okay. As long as you can read, write, and add. If they can play the piano, they're musical. If they can't, that's okay. As long as they can read, write, and add. Why do we do that? Because 200 years ago, we needed people to be able to read, write, and add all over the world. And be able to swap them around. Now, the world's changed. And in fact, let's have a look at some of the changes that are happening right now. The first thing is that by 2030, there will be about 9 billion people on the planet. So massive population growth. 200 years ago, how many people on the planet? Less than 1 billion. Now we're going to have 9 billion by 2030. And actually, the population is not going to be a general spread of population as you expect. Actually, a lot of it's going to be older. If you survive today, your life expectancy is 4 hours longer than this morning. Average person born today will live to about 100. Average person born in 1813 would live to 1. Massive child mortality rates, which we've eradicated. Child mortality is less than 2%, less than 1% in most developed countries in the world. It was well over 50, 60, 70% earlier in the last couple of centuries. So we have this situation where we're going to have all of these people, and by the way, we're going to live with chronic diseases. Because people over 60, 70, they become at risk to dementia, Alzheimer's, cancer. Today, about 20% of your tax dollars support the health system. In 2023, that'll be 40%, and in 2043, that'll be 100%. Obviously, that's not workable. So we need to find some ways to solve that, and technology is one of those ways. Okay, second thing that's happening at the moment, urbanisation. People are moving from the country to the city, 60 million a year. In China, they build a city the size of Beijing every how many months? 3 to 4 months. They build a skyscraper in 15 days. All of those people need services. They all need electricity, water, transportation, sanitation, health services, food. In fact, if we talk about food, we need more food in the next 50 years. We need to produce more food in the next 50 years than we had to produce in the last 500 years. How are we going to do that? How are we going to do the agriculture, the aquaculture, to do that?
It's a problem as well because we're reaching peak phosphate in terms of mining.
Right.
Concentrated sources of it. And that's obviously a core requirement and the case with lots of.
Okay, so there you have one of the many, many challenges. In Australia, what's the biggest challenge?
Sorry?
What's the biggest challenge in Australia? Water. Absolutely. Our water table can probably sustain about 25 million people, and we're at about 23.5 and growing. Okay, the next thing that's happening today that didn't happen, that's changed our world from the 1800s is this globalization. In India, in 2005, that's 7 years ago, 8 years ago, how much of the population in India was middle class in 2005? Give me a guess, any guess? Middle class, India, 2005, 8 years ago. Nobody's come up with the day that it's going to swap, right? And we're at day 7, right? So you're already at $10 times 2 to the minus 7.
My money's on tweeting your answer.
Sorry?
Tweeted the answer.
Oh, did you? Okay.
My money's on day 4.
Your money's on day. What did you tweet?
I said day 14 at $147.
Day 14 is correct. He tweeted it before you said it. There you go. Well done. I won't even do the minus. Okay, so 5% is the answer, by the way. 5%, 8 years ago, 5% of the Indian population was middle class. 2020. What do you reckon the population is going to be? What percentage of the Indian population? Sorry, not 2020, 2015. 20%. And by 2030, it'll be 40%. So 40% of a growing population. Remember, India by 2030 is going to be 1.4 billion people, 40% of that. That makes Australia look like a little backward island somewhere. Okay, and then the last thing is the information explosion. They reckon by the end of this year, we will have generated, stored, indexed, and we won't have analyzed it all, 7.9, almost 8 zettabytes of data. What's a zettabyte? You get gigabytes, terabytes, petabytes, exabytes, zettabytes. So let's put that in context. Every day, today, this year, every day, we generate as much information as recorded history until 2003. Every day. All of those selfies you take on Instagram, all of this Facebook status updates, all of the times you cash your credit card and you get frequent flyer points and you go to Target and Kmart, all of that information, every time you jump in a cab, fly an aeroplane, every time a traffic light changes, every time the weather changes and there's weather sensors all over farms, that data is being collected. And it's a massive, massive issue. How do we manage that? How do we index it? How do we sort it? How do we analyze it? And that's the difference, those 4 things, population growth, urbanization, globalization, and information explosion, make today's world massively different from when we invented literacy, effectively, when we invented school to teach mass literacy 200 years ago. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the technology disruptions that we have today. Who can mention the 4 that everybody talks about at the moment? 4 massive shifts in technology right now.
Globalization.
No, shifts in technology. Those are macro forces. Social media is one. Sorry?
Big data.
Big data? Cloud. Mobile. Okay, here we go. So I don't need to give this part of the presentation. What's cloud computing?
Magic.
Distributed.
Buzzwords.
Oh, buzzwords. There's a cynic in the room, and so young. What's cloud computing? Anybody, tell me.
It's distributed computing plus utility computing plus virtualization plus new business model.
Let's look at it another way. Let's look at it through the lens of architectures. So we started off with the mainframe, right? Mainframe, dumb terminal. We went to mini computer. We went to microcomputers, PCs. PCs then were distributed, so we had distributed networks. So we had peer-to-peer architectures. Went from peer-to-peer to client-server architectures. From client-server architectures, we went to n-tier architectures. So you separated presentation from compute and from logic, right? And then what was the latest buzzword over the last 6 years? Come on.
Back to mainframe.
No.
Web 2.0.
No. Has anybody heard of service-oriented architecture, SOA? Yes. Okay, Lucy hasn't, but she's a public school teacher. Okay, so SOA. So you can't have cloud computing without SOA, because the whole premise of cloud computing is that you're using services from the cloud. Let's look through another lens. The other lens is when we first started drawing network diagrams, we had PCs connected to servers on local area networks. Then we connected to those local area networks to remote PCs using a modem. And that modem connected to the telephone network, the PSTN, public switch telephone network. And how did we draw the PSTN on any network diagram? We drew a cloud. It's exactly what we did. And then from the PSTN, we had direct WAN links, wide area network links between sites. And how did we draw the WAN? As a cloud. And then the WAN became the internet. And we used to connect computers to servers across the internet. And how do we draw the internet? As a cloud. And now all we've done is we've taken those servers out of the corporate premises and we've stuck them in the middle of the cloud. And that's why it's called cloud computing. That's the only reason it's called cloud computing. So, definition of cloud computing. Definition of cloud computing is something that's network attached, gives you a service, often over a browser, but it doesn't have to be over a browser, is elastic, so it can scale up and scale down, and is rapidly scalable, and is consumed as a service. So it's an operational expense rather than a capital expense. You have a question or a challenge?
No, cloud is for Steve Jobs and using the heavens. That's why I created it.
Okay. So here's the interesting thing about cloud. All it does is it describes the way that we will deliver IT to people and industry. Okay? So when people talk about cloud strategy, it's nonsensical. That's like talking about my hotel strategy. I don't have a hotel strategy. I have a travel strategy, and the travel strategy might include a house, it might include a corporate office block, and it might include a hotel. Right? Okay. So the next big one was mobility. And mobility is pretty obvious, right? Who here hasn't got a smartphone? Wow, really? Just not rich enough or something, waiting for the Samsung Galaxy S5, I don't know. Okay, anybody else not got a smartphone? Anybody not got a tablet? Okay, a couple of people. Anybody not got a laptop? Look at the room, right? One person doesn't have a laptop. And I think he's lying. I would say he's lying. So think about that, though. Think about the availability of compute. In fact, I reckon, how many people we've got in the room? 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 22. I reckon in this room, we could pretty much get to about 5 to 10 terabytes of storage. Everybody in this room. If you started adding up your laptops, your tablets, your mobile phones. Yeah, your hard drives on your laptops. Yeah.
There's 2 megabytes there.
So you go. So, what does mobility give us? Oops. Access. Mobility gives us access to data. Okay, next one, social media. Every 60 seconds, a lot of this stuff happens. And what is that about? If cloud gives us the way we're going to deliver IT to people, and mobile devices are the way we're going to access.
Time frame, it affects how fast we use of content.
Yeah, content.
No, I said time frame.
I know you said time frame, he said content. Yeah, I heard both of you. It's the way we behave. Does anybody, in fact, I can see it right now, when I just look around the room, right? There are people tweeting and Facebooking and updating and catching up, taking notes, YouTube. More hours get added. I think it's like something like 24 hours of YouTube get added every 60 seconds. 24 hours of video, right? And if you think about the other day, one of my friend's sons went to babysit for somebody, and they said, "Do you want us to show you how to change a nappy?" And he said, "No, it's all right. Go out to dinner." And they said, "What are you going to do when you need to change a nappy?" He said, "I'll YouTube it." Right? It's changing the way we behave.
Yeah, everything can be Google.
It's changing the way we behave. There was a 15-year-old girl who got lost in the Blue Mountains about 6 months ago. What was the first person she contacted? Facebook. The interesting thing, though, 3,000 people within an hour were calling emergency services, SES. They cross-triangulated where she was and they rescued her. 18 months ago, a 19-year-old English backpacker got lost in the Blue Mountains. He phoned 000. They said, where are you? He said, I don't know, I'm in the Blue Mountains. They said, what cross street did you leave? He said, I don't know, I'm English backpacker and I'm lost in the Blue Mountains. And he died of exposure 2 days later. So counterintuitively, it doesn't sound like it makes sense, right? But actually, connecting with Facebook parallelizes the task of people finding you. Whereas phoning 000 gets expert resources, but it's only single expert resources, a point resource. So it's already changing the way that we behave with each other. Okay, and the last one we've mentioned, big data. This is a great story, happened February last year. A father, much like myself, stormed into the local Target and had a go at the manager for sending promotion materials for pregnant women to his 16-year-old daughter. The manager of the store apologized profusely, contacted headquarters. Turns out that the 16-year-old daughter was pregnant. Target knew from her buying patterns with a 78% accuracy that she was pregnant before she knew. That's the power of big data. So big data gives us context.
Target is the father.
Okay, so now I know that everybody thinks that cloud, social, big data and mobile is the technology disruptions of today, but they aren't. They're the technology disruptions of yesterday. I'm going to go through the next 4 technologies that are happening right now. Right now. They will change our world. They'll absolutely disrupt our world. And in fact, if you have got any sense, this is the next 4 slides that you need to watch, because this will determine what you do for your career. First one. Anybody heard of the Internet of Things? What's the Internet of Things?
IP address on everything, like that. Like laptop will have an IP address, or the chair will have an IP address. Everything will have an IP address.
Okay. So what? So everything's got an IP address. So what?
Everything you got get started while you're at work.
Yeah, everything's networked and then you can control remotely.
Yeah. Already today, you can go onto a Google map and you can see the traffic. And where do they get the traffic information from?
The buses.
No, not Facebook, not the buses. Come on. Sorry?
Cars?
No. Oh, yes, cars. But what in the cars? Your mobile phones. Right. There's a device that you are carrying already today that is connecting and sending information to a Google server, and they're publishing it on the internet. Now, can you imagine when your car talks to the car that's in front? I ride a motorbike. I ride a Ducati Multistrada. And it'd be really nice for that Camry driver's car to know that I'm coming down the inside lane, so the car can't turn in front of me. And that car can talk to the traffic lights, and the traffic lights can sense when there's a lot of traffic waiting, and they can automatically do traffic management. That's the Internet of Things. What about health? Already we have people walking around with Fitbit ups, Jawbone ups, Fitbit ones, sensing their biometric data. But you'll get old people that'll have pacemakers that'll be taking their pulse, blood pressure monitors, and automatically their nurses. What about, mention an industry, what about agriculture? I was working 4 years ago to start up a company, a startup that would measure the soil moisture in fields, and then look at the weather forecast system and automatically control how much water you put into the field. You can increase your crop yields by 70%, you can decrease your water usage by 50%, you decrease your power usage by about 40%, and you almost eliminate labour. And that's how we're going to overcome things like the food challenge, through the Internet of Things, sensors acting automatically. Okay, next thing, wearable tech. Anybody seen Google Glass? Anybody written an app for Google Glass yet? Why not? Okay, just checking. The iWatch will come out. Samsung Gear Watch. Sony's got a watch out. The Pebble Watch is out. We've spoken about the Jawbone Up and the Fitbit One. we will be wearing more and more technology. I mean, Bluetooth headsets is technology. Watches actually are wearable tech. But we'll be wearing connected wearable technology. Okay. Emotive.com. Anybody heard of Emotive? It's this woman called Tan Le. Came over to Australia when she was 2 years old, a Vietnamese immigrant. By the time she was 16, she got a scholarship to go to University of Melbourne to do law. She became a barrister. After about 5 years, she got tired of being a barrister, so she started a software company in Silicon Valley. She exited, made a couple of $1 million, like 50 or something, and she decided to do something challenging. Makes you feel like a real underachiever. And she came up with this device. She's been thinking for years about how do you tap into autistic savants, right? So you know these autistic savants like Rain Man, right? They can just see the answer to a question, or they can play brilliant pieces of music. Sometimes people have a car accident and they become an autistic savant. And so her reasoning is that brain power must be in there. How do we unlock that? And so she came up with this device called the Emotive Epoch. And it's 11 sensors or 12 sensors, and it basically gives you a higher fidelity electroencephalograph than a clinical electroencephalograph that costs $300,000 or $200,000. The Epoch costs about $300, and her next one is a Kickstarter project, which is just she's just raised the funding. She's raised $4 million on Kickstarter, and the next one's called the Emotive Insight, and that's only going to have 5 sensors. But get this, what she can do is she can actually calibrate your brainwaves, and then you can train it 17 different thoughts. So you can train it up and down and left and right. And go to the website, emotive.com, and watch the video. She takes 4 or 3 quadriplegic musicians, and using just their brains, they mix a dance track. So they control the whole sound desk, they control the beats, they control the sounds, they control the music, using just their thoughts. They're quadriplegic, they can't actually move anything. Now you can imagine something like that kind of wearable technology in a car, and you think I'm going right, and the right indicator comes on, and you can control the car, right? Or on a motorbike, and somebody stops in front of you, and between the car telling your bike that the person's stopping and you thinking, you're braking half a second or a second before you would have hit the brakes. Think about the one use that she's got for it is for elite athletes and elite performers. And what they do is they wear it all the time, and while they're performing, when they hit peak performance, they actually track what their brain's doing. And then they can train their brain to do that, to get back into that mind state, because they've measured all of that. That's what wearable tech is going to be able to do for us. Okay, so next one. We've spoken about the Internet of Things, spoken about wearable tech. Oh, by the way, the Insight is $229. Next one. And you can get an SDK for it and connect it to your iPhone. 3D printing. Who reckons this is going to be big? Only half the class. Okay, cynics at the back. Why don't you think 3D printing is going to be big?
Because it's still going to be more expensive than buying something that doesn't have its manufacturing process streamlined.
Once it makes large economy, you do all sorts of backward integration.
Here's a question. How many materials can we 3D print in at the moment?
5.
Any advances on 5?
It's printing pasta last night.
I mean, virtually anything you can print with metal. That's already.
Yeah, metal particle based.
170 materials we can print in. So think about this. I agree with you. Right now, remember this experiment that I'm doing here, right? Everybody thinks linearly, $10 a day, rather than doubling every year. So you're right. Right now, it is more expensive to 3D print something than it is to manufacture it in China and ship it across. But
Makes sense. It's still cheaper to prototype it yourself.
It's cheaper to prototype it yourself. Apple is already doing this. Because what they lose in printing it back in California, they more than gain by taking 156 companies out of their supply chain. And all of the shipping and all of the logistics. 3D printing will totally disrupt manufacturing. because it is easier to ship electrons than it is to ship atoms. And can you imagine a world where you've got a washing machine that's connected with an IP address on the Internet of Things, automatically connects back to its server and says, this component has failed. That connects to your printer, prints the component, connects to the service tech, who comes and installs it for you. Think about going into McDonald's with your 4-year-old, and you buy a Happy Meal, and instead of getting the toy gets printed on your home printer with her name embossed on it. And she actually gets the toy that she wants. She doesn't get the boy's toy because there's no girls' toys left.
But she wants it, and she walks into the store.
Well, that's right. Why would you walk into the store? At TED, last year at TED, they showed how they've already printed a kidney. They already print cartilage that they can attach to your face, and skin and flesh just grow back around it. So when I come off my motorbike, my wife doesn't want to hear this, and I need a new spleen, right? They will print my spleen, and I'll never need anti-rejection drugs. And that future is 2 to 3 years away. Okay, the fourth big thing is bioinformatics, specifically gene mapping. How much does it cost to sequence your genome today?
3,000.
3,000. Any advances on 3,000? Sorry? 300. That's a 10 times advance on 3,000. Any advances on 300? If you go to 23me.com, they will send you a swab, which you put in an envelope. You can send it to them internationally. And for the princely sum of $99, they will sequence your genome for you. Pardon?
I'm out of date.
You're out of date, yeah. And you know, you're probably only 6 months out of date, right? Because of this power of things doubling every year. Okay. So those 4 technologies, Internet of Things, 3D printing, wearable tech, genome mapping. Those will be the disruptors that cloud, mobile, social, and big data are today. And of course, cloud, mobile, social, and big data aren't going away, right? Those are the fundamental platforms that will underpin those new technologies. In the same way that the internet and networking and storage and virtualization and automation technology underpins the cloud, mobile, social revolution, right? Miniaturization technology. Okay, so let's come to the sticky end of the presentation. What is the challenge? What is the challenge for digital literacy? So there's this myth, and I know I'm talking to the wrong body of people, right? But there's this myth that everybody who is your age is a digital native. And as a digital native, they are just so tech savvy. And whilst I agree that my 15-year-old daughter can text faster than I can, even though I text faster than my 25-year-old daughter, but my 15-year-old daughter can text faster than I can, and she can have 3 chat windows open on 4 different networks, or maybe 4 on 3 different networks, because otherwise the maths doesn't work out. And she can be doing her maths homework at the same time. I'm not sure she's really doing her maths homework. In fact, maths, I know she's not doing her maths homework. They can Facebook and tweet and Instagram and everything, and they certainly are far more adept at doing that than people who haven't grown up with that technology. I don't think they're digitally literate. In fact, I think we can prove that they're not digitally literate. When my 15-year-old comes to me and opens her laptop and says, the laptop's broken because the internet's not working, she can't use a computer, right? When somebody comes to my wife at school and goes, the projector's not working because it's not plugged in, they can't use a computer. When somebody can't log on to Gmail because they haven't cleared their cookies, they can't use a computer. And so whilst people can read technology, they can't write the technology. How many people can create a video, or mash up a song on audio, or generate a website, actually create a website, and code in HTML? How many people can write a macro? And you say, well, why is that important? Sorry, I had to put that little picture in there. And I'll tell you why it's important. And to tell you why it's important, I'm going to go back to the 1850s. So this is one of the first examples of visualization and big data. Anybody know who came up with that chart? Oh, yes. Geez, I wish I had another $10 to give you. Anybody heard of Florence Nightingale? Yep, also called the Lady of the Lamp. Okay, and she was a nurse. So what's this graph about? Well, what happened was the blue areas are people that died in the Crimean War in the hospitals because of things that weren't wounds, right? They weren't sword and shot wounds. They were from diseases. They were from infections. The pink area is causes that were actually caused by the war, right? So that's trauma from being shot, falling off your horse, being hacked. But look how many people died in hospitals that could have been prevented. And what Florence Nightingale did, her big innovation wasn't about being a good nurse. I mean, she was a good nurse, don't get me wrong. She did lots of things for nursing. But her big innovation was actually taking data and visualizing it for the Parliament back home in England to get them to send resources, to get doctors to wash their hands, to get them to send resources to disinfect hospitals. And she did that through visualizing data. Now imagine she didn't have to spend a year. This is a year's worth of data she collected. Imagine she didn't have to spend a year because of technology. She could just hit a button and an Excel chart could show, and she could just email that back to the Parliament. How many millions of soldiers would have survived, or hundreds of thousands of soldiers would have survived? My second daughter, Em, is a nurse. She's just graduated as a nurse. And what does a nurse do? Nurses. Thanks, Lucy. What tasks does a nurse do?
Drug administration.
Drug administration. So they administer things? Absolutely.
They give you injections.
They give you injections. So that's the same as administering drugs. Yep. It's just a way of administering drugs. Yep.
Data collection.
Data collection. So they monitor or measure and they administer. Right? 80% of a nurse's job is, what does the chart say? What's the pulse? What's the blood pressure? What's the rate of infection? What does the wound look like? Right? And then also in that 80% is, let's give you the drugs that the doctors have told us to give you. Now, I'll ask you a question. Can a computer measure more accurately? Wow. I thought we were going to intimate lighting. Can a computer measure more accurately than my daughter?
Yes.
Which?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Watson's a fascinating.
Watson actually goes a lot further. Watson does cognitive prescribing and diagnosis as well. But let's just stay with standard today's technology, not cognitive computing. Can a computer administer drugs more accurately than Em? The answer is yes. Okay, so 80% of my daughter's job will be disintermediated by computers. It will happen. It will happen. Because computers will never go to sleep. They'll never have a bitch fight with a supervisor. Right? They won't get tired or cranky. They will work 60, 80, 100-hour shifts. They'll never switch off. And they will do it cheaper and more accurately than people can do. But here's the question. What can't a computer do? Which is the other 20% of a nurse's job. Pardon?
They can't love you.
They can't love you. They can't.
They can't give you a good heart.
They can't give you a good heart. They can't cuddle you. Right? They can't. They can't show empathy.
And they could go wrong.
Yeah, but nurses
go wrong a bit more often than computers do. But they can't show empathy. They can't show care. Okay, so that's nurses. What about teachers? What is 80% of a teacher's job? I'm saying this with my wife, who I've got to sit with in the car for the next 3 hours going back to Sydney. So I've got to watch my toes. Yeah.
Keeping kids busy.
Keeping kids busy. But what if those kids weren't in the classroom? What if they were
running amok?
What if they were dialing in from home? No, come on. What's 80% of a teacher's job? Educating, instructing. Okay. Can we use interactive technologies to instruct more accurately, more efficiently, cheaper than we can with people?
Yeah, I would agree.
Yes.
More efficiently, but cheaper possibly.
Khan Academy teaches 10 million students for free. Right.
So it's cheaper, but not the same quality in the same sense.
I don't know. I mean, because if you actually think about the number of kids who go through the school system and don't successfully, achieve the goals set, like we obviously all did, but there are a lot of people who go.
So there's 20%, right? Remember, 80% of a teacher's job is instructing and administering a process. 20% of their job is inspiring lifelong learning, inspiring curiosity, observing students' strengths and directing them in giving them the resources that they need. That 20%, computers will probably not do until Watson becomes mainstream, right? But the other 80% can and will be disintermediated by technology. Think of an industry, and I guarantee you that technology will disintermediate and disrupt that industry. Farming, street planning, plumbing, manufacturing.
IT.
And if you don't believe me, I flew back from Melbourne yesterday and I took this photograph in Sydney Airport Domestic Terminal. This is 3 months. 3 months ago or 6 months ago, that was queues of people with check-in counters, with people doing a job. And they've been doing that job since 1953. We've had check-in assistants. And in 6 months, Sydney Airport is machines. And in fact, you know what? 80% of the people don't check in at those kiosks. They check in on their mobile phone, and they walk straight up to the aeroplane, and they just scan their phone, and they walk onto the aeroplane. So, what do we do then? Well, here's my thesis. My thesis is this. We need to teach kids to read, write, and do maths.
And buy Macs.
And so I worked for HP, but that was the only picture I could get of a whole bunch of kids. I know, right? We need to teach kids to read, write, do maths, and code. I think we need to be teaching kids, when they come into school, to code, to program. How do we do that? Scratch.
Logo.
Yeah, logo from 1967. I know, right?
MSW logo, it's quite updated.
Kodu. Anybody heard of Kodu? You can download that from kodugamelab.com. So that'll allow you to program games, actually create games. This is a really, really easy way to learn how to program. You literally take blocks and you can share them and you can mash them and you can learn programming. And then when you get a little bit more advanced, you go and to Alice from Carnegie Mellon. Anybody heard of Randy Pausch? Randy Pausch headed this program, www.alice.org. So there's something else, and this is a mistake that I made. Remember what I was talking about when I said, when somebody comes to me and they open their laptop and they can't connect to the internet, they can't use a computer? What was the mistake that I made as a dad who was in IT for 20 years? I fixed it. I fixed it. And what should I do?
Make them work it out.
Right. I should have given them a Raspberry Pi. We didn't have Raspberry Pis in my day. An Apple Pi? No. Apple Mac? I don't know. Some fruit. BlackBerry? No. No. I should have let them fix it and figure it out for themselves. I should have given my kids challenges. And when they came and asked me about English, I should have found a way for them to, I don't know, write a macro in Word to automatically count their words or something, right? So when you go home for Christmas and you see your siblings and they can't use a computer and they call upon you because you're the geek and the guru, don't fix it for them, right? Point them at Scratch. Teach them to program. Okay, I'm going to leave you with one of my quotes. I started with Arthur C. Clarke's quote. Any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. My quote is this. Imagine the impact that Australia could make on the world if every citizen could code. Thank you very much. I've got 2 minutes and 45 seconds for any questions. Any questions? Any questions?
So, I mean, there's been problems, like there's a fault on Apple and Microsoft and Facebook and Google's part as well, because they've done everything down to make magic black boxes, and they try to make people think that there's, like, it's just all meant to work, and there are no technical.
I agree with you. I would say the same for Porsche, Ferrari, Volkswagen. I mean, who here fixed the ignition on their car? Who here has actually replaced brake pads on their car, ever? One. Right. Why? Well, because you just take it to the mechanic now. Right? That's what happens with technology. It becomes commoditized. It does become commoditized. But who here can drive a manual car? Right? You can all drive a manual car. You've got to learn to drive it. You've got to learn to navigate. So, but you raise a good point, right? How many novelists do you think we need in the world? In a world of 9 billion people, how many novelists and authors do you think we need? 20,000? 20,000, they write 10 books each, that's 2 million books. Oh no, it's 200,000 books. Okay, maybe let's say 100,000. 100,000 out of 9 billion people. How many computer scientists do we need in the world?
As many as possible.
No, it's probably about the same, right? It's about the same as authors. But I ask you this, how many people do you think in the world needs to be able to read and write? Everyone. And just because we need 100,000 computer scientists, IT specialists, IT programmers, how many people do you think we need to be able to code, to write macros, to work that technology as a nurse or as a doctor? All of them. And that's one thing. Yep.
So then it seems like the responsibility solely lies on the education of the parents. And they're really absolving any responsibility on teaching how to do things from being corporate.
Yeah, that's a good question. Whose responsibility is it to teach people to drive?
Parents.
Parents?
The government takes a lot of it.
Government takes a lot of it.
License that people do it. So
Yeah.
potentially, if you had needed a license to use a computer,
Some countries discourage people getting a license to use public transport, which is a good idea.
So is it? But the question I have is it Ford's responsibility to teach people to drive?
It's in their interest.
It's in their interest, absolutely. That's why if you buy a Porsche, you join the Porsche club and they teach you to drive on a track, right? Of course it's in their interest, but actually it's a responsibility of society and parents. I don't think that's absolving anybody of responsibility though, because I think we're all citizens and most of us will probably become parents.
It's a bit of a different example though, because with a company like HP, Facebook, you name any of the tech companies, they have a vested interest in people having strong coding skills because they want workers to flow into their workforce.
Yep. Yes and no. Actually, they don't. Look at every single one of the big tech companies apart from Facebook and Google in the last 10 years and have a look at the trend of hiring versus firing. They're shedding people. Because payroll is expensive. Payroll is one of the biggest costs as a business. So if you can automate, then you have less cost, right? And you can make more margin. So it's not about employment. I mean, yes, we want to hire smart people. Don't hear this message wrong, right? And if any of you are looking for an internship or a graduate program, HP has got both of those. But it's not about employment. The vested interest for Microsoft, I ran Microsoft evangelism for some time, and I appreciate I'm between you and beer, so sorry about that. Is what is the biggest cash cow for Microsoft?
Office.
That's number two. Number one?
Businesses.
What segment of software?
Desktop.
Operating.
OS. Windows. Right, Windows. Windows Server and Windows Desktop. Who uses Windows? Yeah, no, not in this room. Which people use Windows?
Schools.
Enterprise. But who buys Windows and just has Windows running?
Actually, a lot.
Nobody. Everybody buys Windows so that they can run a program on it. Office or a CAD program. So for Microsoft to sell Windows, what do they need in their ecosystem? Developers. They need developers. They need developers developing .NET software that only runs on Windows, so that people will buy that program. MYOB only runs on Windows. They have to buy a copy of Windows. So what does Microsoft do? They pour money into trying to educate people to become .NET developers, right? Okay, so Microsoft believed that there were two inflection points for when you adopt a technology in your career. Inflection point number one, when you leave high school and you go to university, whatever technology you're surrounded with is probably the technology that you're going to learn and that you'll use in your career. Inflection point number two, when you leave university and you go to work, the company that you work for. You're probably going to go for a company, if you're a .NET programmer, you're probably not going to go to a Java shop, but you might go and work for a bank that's got .NET and Java programmers, and you might migrate across to Java or open source, right? So inflection point number one, go to university. Inflection point number two, go to work. I believe that's flawed. And why do I believe that's flawed? Anybody got any nieces and nephews that are around 2 to 4 years old? Any of them play with iPads? Where do you think inflection point number one is now? Before school. I've spoken to 5 schools in the last 6 weeks. Every single one of them is replacing Windows desktops with iPads and Macs. So by the time those kids hit university, what technology will they be used to? Apple. And so Microsoft is pouring all this money into trying to get people to become .NET developers, and it's too late. Because they should be trying to get people to become developers at 6. Right? I think I'm joking. I do, unfortunately, know about the national curriculum. What's the problem with the national curriculum? What's the biggest problem with any national curriculum?
They don't teach.
Teachers have to teach it. My wife would probably agree with you. No, what's the problem with it? How many times do you change a national curriculum? Once every 20 years. Once every 20 years. They're going to fix our IT national curriculum for the next 20 years. Now, remember the experiment we just did with 20 coffees? Right? Things will double. What multiplication effect do you get over 20 years if something's doubling every year? 1 million. It's 1024 by 1024, right? 2 to the power of 10 for the first 10 years, and then 2 to the power of 10 for the next 10 years. So you get 1,000 times increase in 10 years, and you get 1 million times increase in 20 years. So the national curriculum that we set today is working with computers that will be 1/1,000,000th of the power, 1,000,000 times the price, 1,000,000 times the size, weight, etc. of 20 years' time. Is that an effective solution? No. Sorry.
So, do you think that we should start teaching things like binary arithmetic, coding skills in primary school, or
yes?
Primary school, yeah.
I do. I think we should be getting kids to play with Scratch and to be learning about if-then queries, for next loops, error correction, error handling, event mapping, memory scavenging. I think all of those things. So that when a child comes to a problem as a nurse or as a doctor or as a plumber, they can actually look at the problem, decode it into an algorithm, and then work with the technology to solve that problem. Absolutely. And I think that should be in primary school. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, given what you've been saying about how, big data, etc., that's, those are the 4 big things which are the 4 disruptive technologies of yesterday. Mm-hmm. What should, particularly as undergraduate students who will be going out, I'm looking for an honours project, and then I'm going to be looking for a graduate job very, very shortly. How, what strategies should one be using to try and get into the next big things rather than, because here at ANU we've just hired more people for big data. Yep. Is that where we should be looking, or should we be looking elsewhere?
So I don't think you can go wrong with big data. Gartner reckons that by 2015, that's just a year and a bit away, we will need 4.4 million data scientists. We'll be lucky to fill about 1/3 of those. So if we look at the 4 technologies that I mentioned, the Internet of Things. So anything you can do with embedded devices, anything you can do with networking protocols, connecting people to machines, machines to machines, is a good thing to get into. Anything you can do with storage. A bit became a byte. A byte was stored in a block. They spun the block and the disk was born, and so we stored information, right? But anything with storage. So storage, databases, structured data, unstructured data, indexing, analyzing, anything to do with that will be a good career to get into. If you start looking at 3D printing, that's all about design. Design you can come to one of two ways. You can come from the technology side, or you can come from cognitive psychology, right? Human interactive design. So anything in the design fields. And the last one we were talking about was gene mapping, right? So bioinformatics. Anything you can do around bioinformatics, biomimicry. I read last week, or actually 2 days ago, they've come up with the first carbon nanotube processor. And how do they do it? How do they create those carbon nanotubes? DNA, right? They literally put DNA in a silicon substrate, put the carbon atoms in, washed it all away, and now you've got your carbon nanotube. So bioinformatics, anything around that would be a really good career to get into. But program. We will always need programming.
We'll wrap it up there. Yeah, we'll wrap it up there.
Any other questions? Going. Anybody want to buy me a beer? No? Okay.
Okay. On behalf of everyone here, I'd like to thank you for an amazing talk.
No worries. Pleasure. And Lucy will be, look, it's Lynn. Thank you very much. It is. It's my birthday tomorrow.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Raj.
Thank you very much. Connect with me at Rog42 or Rog42 on Facebook, LinkedIn. Doesn't matter whether you want to do it personally on Twitter or professionally on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with anybody. If you need to email me, Rog42 at rog42.net or rog42 at hp.com, and I will endeavor to email you. Thank you very much for your time, guys. You've been a great audience.